A lot of hair when this song came out, Rusty. Hey, this is Kirk.
And this is Byrd. Welcome to the Kirk and Byrd Show. Hey, we've got a great show lined up for you. We're going to hit all the hot topics. We're coming strong in a review of this past weekend's college football action. I tell you what, going into this weekend, Richard Knowles and I texted each other, and we were like, oh, this is going to be a boring college football weekend. Because we thought last weekend, we went from having the greatest weekend in college football 2 weeks ago to the following week being a dud. Like, I recorded like 12 games and thought nothing was going to be worth watching last week. And so Rich was like, yo, man, we got another dud. But no, we got something. We got a couple of good games. We got some unexpected. I don't know about you gamblers out there, but teams didn't meet the spread. We could hit that a little bit. But the main thing is we want to hit you with some VT talk. So some of our guests today, we have VCU and Virginia Tech alumni, but not just that, Fred Gusler was in the house. He was at Lane Stadium. He's been a journalist in the past. He's going to give us his take. Like being in the stadium, I heard a lot of crazy stuff was going on, like fire, Fuente. To go with that, we got Richard Knowles, our college football expert who's been on the show before, and of course, my co-host, Phantom graduate Kirk Hilliard. Let's go ahead, Kirk. What you got? How you want to start this?
Well, Fred, since you were there, we seen video, but talk to us about the game. Give us your take on the game. It was back and forth. Tech had a 9-point lead. Why don't we just sit back, relax, and let you give us your overview of the game since you were the man in the stands.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me. And nice to talk about it. I've been to, this is the third game that I've attended this year. I went last week to Pittsburgh, but I went to the UNC game. Mm-hmm. And each game has had its various, I don't want to say anomalies, but things that the team manages to do well in some areas and then can't replicate that onto the next week. So I had a goal, I guess, in watching this game, that I wanted to take a closer look at our passing game. And I'd been pretty critical of Burmeister early on because it really seems like he's very timid about throwing the ball until the receiver actually breaks free. Remember, RG3 was criticized heavily for that. Couldn't throw those timing routes. So you have to throw the ball when the receiver's out of his, coming out of his break and have that timing. Mm-hmm. And so I was watching that in the passing game, and there wasn't. I can't put that all on Burmeister because in this game, as in a lot of games past, where some plays there's a very limited route tree. We're sending out two receivers sometimes. They played a lot of double tight on offense, which seemed to really confuse Syracuse at times. They would start off with the tight end on two tight ends on one side, one would go in motion, and they ran and threw the ball well out of that set quite a bit. So the big thing on offense though was, of course, the running game, and Thomas coming in, and guy hadn't seen him hardly all year. And
this
kid
he
tears it up, and we're used to. I mean, I remember Rusty, you were talking about it a couple of weeks ago on this show that where's the old school Virginia Tech football was, traditionally it was about the running game on offense, of course, great defense and special teams, but we were always a ground team and kind of had that, that blue collar mentality on offense. And so finally they were really opening up some holes. But the O-line and the protection schemes really struggled at times. And that's what at that last drive, when we had the ball, when we needed to get a first down to close out the game, Burmeister got sacked. So the frustrating thing with this team is that, we've seen imbalance we've seen the defense play really well for several weeks. They've held the team up, kept the team in games, and then the offense has struggled. This game, we got a lot of yards. We ran the ball extremely well. The passing game still struggled, but there were some plays there that were made. And then for whatever reason, the matchups on defense, I couldn't quite really pinpoint exactly what our problem was. It was like the D-line, they played well, and they pass rushed fairly well at times. And sometimes, sometimes the plays were the defense, everybody seemed like they were in the right position. We just couldn't cover that one, that last step in a play. And even down to that, I looked at the picture in the papers. I was where I sat. That last play, the last touchdown, I was kind of looking right down at it. And it was pretty tight coverage that Dorian Strong had. And you see the picture, 2 pictures in the Roanoke Times today really showed that, Dorian Strong was there in position to make plays and just didn't get around to doing it. So, of course, leaving the stadium, I mean, everyone's when they're chanting "Fire Fuente," and the deflated feeling of losing like that again, that's really, it's taken a toll on everybody. Everybody's just so down and out about it, and it was otherwise just such a picture perfect, beautiful day in Blacksburg. Day you want to go home with a win against a team, a very, in theory, very winnable game.
Yeah. Fred, let me ask you this. How loud was the Fire Fuente? Because a lot of the media outlets, how loud was it?
Here's the thing. I think it was I think it's being a tad bit exaggerated. I think it may have been louder in some sections because I could hear chanting. But then we got out into the concourse, and there was also a fire or something about "Here we go, Brandon," which is supposedly some code for Joe Biden.
Oh, yeah, that's political. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and that was out in the concourse once I got out there. So I heard the stuff coming down the stairs in the stadium. I could hear some of it. I don't think I was up a little bit higher on the east stands.
Yeah.
And it's not like it felt like most of the crowd was doing it. And it's not like it was something that was so obvious. At least that's my recollection of it. And I didn't leave the game with feeling that was the lasting impression with me. It was more like the whole deflated feeling that everybody had, walking out of there, you're suddenly quiet. A lot of people were simply quiet, like myself. We're just kind of, stunned to see that touchdown, to give up a 45-yard touchdown pass at that stage of the game is unusual. And it was a tough play to lose on.
Yeah.
And it hit the quarterback on that play.
Yeah. I one of the things, I give us a little, we actually scored. We scored 36 points. Yeah. So that was positive, to know that we could put up that many points, but then we gave up 41. My quick analysis of it was, Burmeister was a little bit better with the passing, but it's 177 yards. Like, how is he not going over 200 yards? He was 10 for 20, and he did throw a touchdown, but his QBR is 60. Wow. But the thing that I was most pleased with was, like you mentioned, this kid Malachi Thomas. He rushed for 151 yards. They gave him the rock 21 times.
Wow.
Where was this all year? Kirk, if I'm not mistaken, is this the young man that might have fumbled earlier in the year?
That was Keyshawn King. I think Malachi is young. Something tells me he had a really good week of practice. I mean, that's nice. I like that, but I'd be interested in getting your take, Richard, because I know you're like a college football, aficionado. I mean, what was your take on the game, Richard?
I was surprised that they were not able to pass better, because they were the O-line was blowing holes open for the backs. So I'm sure that the Syracuse probably brought a safety down. I'm sure that they ought to have been able to pass better. I was really surprised at that.
Yeah.
And the other thing I was thinking about was as I'm watching the game here, it's like, this is Vitek. This is the Bud Foster defense. What the hell? What is this? How is Syracuse walking down the field at will? This kid, Schrader, he used to be at Mississippi State. He's a Mississippi State transfer.
Right.
And I swear with that number 16 on, they made him look like he was Trevor Lawrence back there. I was surprised at how the defense didn't, was how Syracuse was able to put 41 points on Vitek. I was shocked.
In Lane Stadium, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
In Lane Stadium. They were able to put up 41 points. Was shocking to me as I'm watching the game. And then to when it really counted, Syracuse just drove right down the field, got a touchdown, win the game. I was surprised at that. This ain't Bud Foster's defense anymore.
Nah.
Yeah, he's been
No.
gone.
So Fred, I actually was surprised that it sounds like your take of it was that fire for Fuente just didn't seem like that may not have been the carrying sentiment of the 44,000 packed in the stadium, huh?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, it just didn't seem like it was. There was some chanting for a while, getting out of there, and it was enough to hear it though, But was it this overwhelming? Just, I mean, I guess it doesn't really take that many people when you have 40-some thousand people. You get if you get 1,000 people chanting something, I mean, in one group, you can hear it. So I mean, they made some noise that way. I guess it just wasn't as overwhelming, and it seemed to just fade into these other chants that were out in the hallway. But even last week at the Pitt game, the conversation from people we were walking through, they were, I was sitting there, Pitt fans, and some of the Hokie fans were talking to Pitt people saying, one guy said, you guys keep buying beer here so we can raise money to fire Fuente. I mean, it was already there's clearly, it's been a discussion, I remember being at a tailgate 2 seasons ago when there was this rumor and from, people around town that know people that are, donors and such that we were going to be firing Fuente and hiring Shane Beamer. And there was some serious, people really thought that was coming. That didn't happen, of course. But so I guess the chant wasn't overwhelming to me in terms of how loud it was, but the sentiment and the feeling and people talking about it around the game and before and after the game, it is definitely real.
Wow.
The articles in the paper, I mean, I think really, to kind of point out the numbers are pretty obvious. When you have, you're going on losing seasons where we didn't have any for years. It's a shock after having, a pretty consistent run for a long time.
Just to put a cap on that discussion, go ahead, Kirk. You have something?
Well, I was going to transition us. I mean, we've talked about Fuente, and by the way, that's going to be a subject that everybody's talking about. So how much attention we get. So,
I do want one last thing about Fuente, because I have something I want to bring, but I want it on the record that I said it first. One, I said 2 years ago, one of the worst things that could happen was when we did continue the bowl streak, because was it 2 years they gave him the extension. But next, the problem I want to ask you guys is, if we do let him go, can you give me anybody you think would be a good replacement? Because I have the name I think would really, really get some people excited. And I know we mentioned the other day, we talked about Bud Foster, we talked about Shane Beamer, we even talked about Hugh Freeze right down the road. But I've got the name and I've got the man to bring back some Hokie prosperity. If we're going to sell our soul, let's go ahead on Ed Orgeron. Let's get Ed up in VT. We know he can recruit. He recruits Virginia very well. He's a player's coach. and he can get this program turned around. That's my
He's
vote.
60. He's 60.
Doesn't matter.
Come on, Rusty.
Bud's our homeboy. We'll hire him at his age, but nah, that guy's 60 years old.
Bud is 62. Bud is 62. What are you talking about?
He's a young 62.
Bud Foster's 62.
I know, but Bud Foster has lived in Virginia since 1987. He's been here for 34 years. Orgeron is a Southern guy. He doesn't have time to build the connections and all that. So I like what you said. And there's probably some other people that will come into play. But, we wanted to talk about recruiting because, there's a lot of stuff out there and that's a good subject. But I will say this, the avalanche has started, okay? Boston College always plays us tough up in Chestnut Hill. And, I'm just telling you, I want the Hokies to win. But if I was at Vegas betting it, I would say we take an L. Now, you listen to how vociferous people are going to get after that. And I'll close with this. Let's talk about recruiting, the state, the region, some of the things we used to do that we don't. Is this, you're going to see more people that are closer to the university, like, for instance, some former players. I don't expect it to be Michael Vick or Bruce Smith. You're going to see them come out and say stuff and not be afraid. And that's simply because the avalanche is coming down. So, Rich, was it you that said you read the article? Because I love talking about recruiting, everybody going out of the state, because that's been happening for a bit.
Yeah. So a couple things. So I've had this view for the longest time. I've even said this to Rusty. Vitek, if they put a fence around Tidewater, they'll be consistently in the top 20 every year. They would have a permanent mark in the top 20 for as long as they wanted to be there. If they put a fence around Tidewater.
Yeah. And that's what they did. That's how they built the program they were.
So the overarching point being is that if they put a lock on Virginia, I think they've got there's talent that comes out of Virginia. There's enough talent in Virginia to sustain Vitek.
Yeah, I agree.
But what I read an article in The Athletic that they polled about 7 Virginia high school coaches, some in Northern Virginia, some in Tidewater, some in Southwest Virginia, out by Blacksburg, Western Virginia. They got a good representation, a good sample of coaches. And one of the consistent things that you got from Northern Virginia coaches, from Tidewater coaches, was that we haven't heard from Fuente. We're not getting much in way of Vitek calls since being elected. And they're also hearing, so what the coaches are also hearing is that Fuente is recruiting in Texas. He's recruiting out of state. It's hard for me to believe that you're going to convince a kid in Texas to come to Blacksburg. Not to say that you shouldn't recruit out of state, but if you're going to forsake, charity starts at home is what the saying goes. But if they were to increase their footprint, increasing their footprint in Virginia would help in 2 ways. Well, first of all, there's talent here. You mind the talent that's here, but also, how do you hate your own? How do you have a problem with or an issue with your team if it's predominantly stocked with local kids? Yes, I guess if you're not winning, that's going to trump everything. But you're going to pull harder for your team, your local team, if they've got local kids.
Yeah,
I think they're making a big mistake if what the high school coach, the Virginia high school coaches are saying is bearing out. If Fuente is ignoring the home kids recruiting national, Vitek is not the kind of school, is not the kind of program that they can recruit well nationally and pull blue chip recruits or high 4-star, 5-star recruits. They're not going to be able to do that nationally. If they lock down the 3- and 4-star recruits they've got in Virginia, and if they can lock down in-state recruits, I think they would be fine.
Mhm.
Beamer did it. Welsh did it when he was at UVA.
Yeah.
I think they're making a mistake by ignoring local. You know.
I interviewed Mickey Thompson on my other podcast, The Kirk Effect, and he says this on camera. I said, "Who is your Virginia Tech recruiter?" He's like, "I don't know." And
Wow.
it's just like one of his players is in a non-coaching position, in an administrative position. You know, Alabama's got like 40 of those, but he goes, "I just talked to Jaron Gavea." And I'm just like, that's one of the top 3 or 4 coaches, arguably maybe the top, and he does not know who his Virginia Tech recruiter is. But I will say this, and I want to get Fred to chime in, is I don't think it's all on Tech or UVA. The trend has been to go out of state because we don't have 113,000 like Pennsylvania. Kids are going to LSU, Texas A&M, et cetera, et cetera. But I like what you said about Texas, because if you get a kid early and text one of their offers, Texas, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Texas Christian, Baylor, they're all going to jump on. So getting those kids, what I'd like to see is us getting back to the region. Man, we have had an incredible amount of players from Maryland. Maryland is a great place. I mean, we've got Antonio Freeman, Vaughn Hebron, just all the Fuller brothers. You go on and on. And then we've done North Carolina well, and that hasn't dropped off that much. We do well in Greensburg, but I would like to see him really regionalize it. It seems like we got a good flow from Georgia. And then I think he's got to make up for like the kids leaving the 757, leaving Richmond, those kind of things. He's got to make up with it by not going like Quincy Patterson was a great recruit, but we've never signed anybody from Chicago. Right. So do you want, I mean, if you got a great player, it's a great player, but I think you should be like, okay, Pennsylvania. By the way, Pennsylvania's been very good to us, and they got enough football players for a lot of programs. So I think it should be like a 300-mile radius. Georgia, and by the way, Florida's always treated us well. But yeah, I agree with you, Rich, that recruiting is going to be one of his downfalls. Now, Fred, you're in Roanoke. In Roanoke, the press probably covers Tech closer than anybody, and then all your journalists live in Blacksburg. Andy Bitter and the beat reporters, a lot of them live there for the larger papers. And what's your take on recruiting? Because you've got some recruits right there where you are that are going elsewhere.
Yeah, and this is there's a lot of good comments so far, because there's a lot to say about this. And what you mentioned Quincy Patterson. So let's take him as just an example. If you're going to go to a guy from a metropolitan area like that, for one, I mean, then he's a long way from home. Most all of us, I mean, whether we're student athletes or just students, you're making your college choice on geography to a large degree and the fit of the institution. So when you get unhappy and you got to catch a plane to get home, you're not just to drive a few hours to get back home.
Yep.
What are you going to think about doing? You're going to start to think about transferring. And Quincy Patterson was a guy, he got some playing time, but he never really got into the role never really was considered that much, I think, to be a starter. So he left, we got a lot of people leaving. Player retention is clearly an issue. I know that everybody has to deal with the transfer portal. It's a way of life. And what I was thinking about the most was, other than, you get these out-of-state kids and they're so far from home that they're more likely to leave. The other thing I was thinking about was what I remember hearing about Beamer in the 2000s. Somebody had told me that Beamer's staff had basically kind of really given up, or they had really downsized their efforts in Florida, because when Bobby Bowden was at Florida State, he was known to not recruit a lot of kids heavily, then at the last minute, when they were close to making their decision, he swooped in and said, "We still got a spot for you."
Bud Thacker.
That supposedly happened to Beamer's staff so much that they were like, the cost benefit of Florida just isn't worth it for us.
Right.
And they clearly, looking at all those old rosters, where Rusty and I grew up in the 757, there were so many players out of that. Phoebus High School had produced a number out of Hampton. They produced for several years in a row some really great players for Tech. And it seemed like that was a real priority of Beamer. And I can only guess that Fuente is relying on his old connections that he established at Memphis, and every coach forges relationships with people all over the country. But to hear that they're not really calling the kids in Virginia is really disheartening, because we want the Virginia kids, and I agree. You get the 3-star recruits out of Virginia, you at least build depth on the roster.
Yeah.
And the depth on this roster has not been there for years. Jermaine Waller hardly played yesterday. It showed. He was missed.
Right.
They don't have the depth. You need the kids that are in line to play and to develop them and keep them. So I feel like it really seems apparent that there's not been a regional local approach to recruiting for a long time, and we've gotten a bunch of out-of-state kids, and it's really starting to show that it's making the program unstable, really.
Okay. Well, Fred, you guys are all hitting all the right notes. One of the things I would say also is, and I heard this, and I'll give some props to my man Drake and Talk, Andre Kendrick, and he has a great podcast you guys should check. But he has a series where he's running his the Stallions. What is it called? The Stallions?
Yeah, he's got about 8 or 9 running backs. It's really
former running backs from Virginia Tech. Really good show.
Let me plug him real quick. Dre, D-R-E-K-E-N, Talk. It's on YouTube. Great channel, by the way. Go ahead.
So I listen to it all the time. And so I was listening to it, and some of the information I'm hearing, and this is a good point. You're right. They need to do better on recruiting Virginia. And I think if you can go 757, like Rich is saying, but also that Roanoke region, a lot of talent. You get a lot of good athletes out of there. You still in Central Virginia, Richmond, and Northern Virginia. If you can get those areas, Southern Maryland, bro, Southern Maryland talent is off the chart. The University of Maryland that's what they're going to focus on, and Penn State is always just taking all those kids. But one of the points that was made on Andre's show is this: we are getting some Virginia athletes, but you know what we're getting? We're not getting the top. And what the point was this: they said we'll get the kids that are being offered by JMU, ODU, not even ODU, JMU, maybe Shenandoah, Norfolk State, Virginia Tech. Now, when those are your offers, if Virginia Tech is your best offer, you're going to grab it. You're going to grab it. There's a difference between being recruited by Virginia Tech and those are your offers, as opposed to, Sean Murphy, Alabama. And Tech wasn't in that list, but Alabama, Ohio, like the great kids are all going. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State,
Sure.
And they, and they may throw in Carolina, maybe from the ACC that's close. And so that's a big difference. That's a big difference in who else is offering you. So that's something when you notice we have these kids, I looked at the roster and I'm going, yeah, but some of these kids, I don't even think they're on scholarship. There are a lot of kids from Virginia, but I know they were walk-ons or, they weren't barely all district or whatever. So I think we got to keep, let me say it this way. We keep that fence around Virginia, but we got to get the 4, the 5, and 3-star recruits.
But Rusty, here's one thing though. Wisconsin, what do you do with these guys that you get? Do you develop them? So even if you're getting, even if you can only pull the 3 stars, Northwestern does not pull in 4 stars. Northwestern does not pull in 5 stars. Now what they're pulling in, the talent level that Virginia, the state of Virginia has versus the talent level of what Northwestern pulls in and develops, I think Virginia is already starting with a better base. Okay. But Northwestern, Wisconsin, these are programs that they're not getting 4 and 5 stars. They're getting 3 stars, and they develop them into teams that are in the top 25. And I think if Vitek did the same thing, develop the homegrown talent, now you're looking at they'd be a tier above. I would think that with what they could recruit. Now, of course, they're not going to beat Bama. They're not going to be, I'm talking about in terms of recruiting. If you got an offer from Bama versus Vitek, or Ohio State versus Vitek, you're probably going to go the Ohio State, or you go Alabama if you think you can start. But if you got if we're talking about the players that a tier underneath the 5-star and the 4-star, you got an offer from Vitek. You can if the team did a better job of developing the local, the talent that they do get, they still can live off of the 3 stars that are left after they get rated by the national programs. They still would have, if they develop the talent.
That was another point made by the guys on Dre's show. Yep, absolutely. They said the same thing. And you know what? One of the backs made a great point. He says, "Who even cares about 3-star, 4-star, 5-star? Get a baller." It's a lot of coaches that know their players. And I'll give you an example. I may not have a star beside this kid's name, but if I can go to Mike Smith, Dennis Kozlowski, or I go into there and Mike Smith tells me this kid can ball. This kid has heart. He may not have the 40 time, but he can play. That's what you can, and that's when you come with developing those relationships. And one of the other points they made is the tech coaches do not have relationships with these coaches. And you guys just said that. But if you can look, if Mickey tells you, no, this is a kid, get this kid, those are the kids you can develop. And it doesn't matter what their stars are,
how hard are they willing to work?
Yeah. So let's transition, but I will say this. One of the things Mickey Thompson told me was Frank Beamer, they came by when there weren't any recruits. In other words, maybe they had Division II or FCS. But so for all of our listeners out there, all you JMU Dukes and all you ODU Monarchs, we're at about 31 minutes. So you want to chime in. Let's talk, Rusty, about the news this week that ODU, because that's kind of our 757 thing, but JMU are going to go to the Sun Belt. So we've got 2 stories here. ODU there's a lot of debate. Is that a good move? So I want to get the panel on it. And then also JMU's taking the big step. A lot of people think they should not do that. They should stay in FCS. So let's just talk about, the Monarchs. They're spending a lot of money on football. Is that a good move to go to the Sun Belt, Fred?
Man, that's a tough question. I don't know enough about ODU as to whether they have really with their board and everybody that's involved in building the program there. Are they really ascending that much? I know that I've seen them obviously. Well, they beat us years ago, so they have that for they have that going for them. That doesn't look as great now, but yeah, I just it feels a little sudden to me. So I don't know. Are they really sure? I question any university that's really starting to take on football and looking out to the future of what you're going to invest and how that's done through your foundation donors and all that. And but it sounds like it. It seems to answer your question, it seems like it is. I think it's that they're trying to go in and get get a little bit more.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Kirk. Okay, I have a thought on this. So, initially hearing it, I was like, oh, JMU, if they're going to go 1A instead of the FBS and all that. If JMU's moving up from 1AA to 1A, wow, that's it's a big move. But the more I think about it, I go back to the argument I had a few years ago. I have a cousin who's ODU, he went to ODU. He's big time and in Lummy. He has suites. He has all type of things. Loves ODU football. In fact, both of his kids attended there. And I remember the excitement when ODU got their football program, and they started out strong. Like in just a very few years, they were going to the playoffs. They were in the CAA. And they did very well. Like they were, because William and Mary at that time had Jimmy Laycock, and they were doing well. But you got to look back. We had JMU had a national championship. University of Richmond had a national championship. William and Mary was always in the discussion, and then ODU came right out smoking. But then they decided to make the move to 1A, join the Conference USA. And the argument I used to say to my cousin is this: look, I don't like the way football is structured with a Power 5 and then a Group 5. If we're going to have a Power 5 and a Group 5 should just break off and have their own national championship, because they're not given the opportunity. We've seen over these years, UCF go undefeated, Liberty and Coastal Carolina have great seasons, and they're not in play for a playoff game. So my point is this: if you're JMU, would you rather hang national championship banners or put up a banner that says we participated in the Poland Weed Eater Bowl? To me, national championships are what count. Look, JMU has won national championships in other sports, and it's just they were national champions, I believe, in field hockey recently. I don't know if their women's soccer might have won or been right there. And that's the highest level national champions. To me, when you can hang that banner, that's what counts. Not I went 8-3 or 8-4 in the Sun Belt, or we may have earned a little bit more revenue, but you're not going to get that same revenue.
Yeah, I think not with the FCS, FBS. They get 20 more scholarships. I think it was a better move for JMU than ODU, because JMU, I think, has more rabid fans. I think that they, no offense, it's not a commuter school. So I think, that their side that they built up that looks like a major football stadium, I think the other side will get done. But obviously for both teams, there was finances involved. And, I'm looking at both conferences and who's members of them. And they're not very exciting. So it's just a jockeying position. So,
so tell the truth. If I asked you the difference between Conference USA and the Sun Belt, did you even know which schools were in which? Not
Nope.
really. Like I always thought, I was like, well, and the other one is the American AAC. Like some of those, like East Carolina in that group is now I've always thought the AAC was a really good conference. You're right, Richard. The bottom half is very weak this year, but I always thought that was as good as some group Power 5 conferences. But my point is this: none of us know where the schools are out west. Like I don't know if it's in the Big Sky, the Big West, the West, whatever. And that's the way it is. Some of these schools, these conferences on the East Coast. If you're not in those Power 5s, why not try to play for a national championship? My recommendation would be go ahead and have a Group 5, and then have a Power 5 national championship, and everybody can win national championships, and still keep the FCS level.
Let's do a counterclockwise round robin here. Richard, what'd you think about this past weekend? Top 25 teams, et cetera, et cetera. Georgia was off. What are your thoughts? So some interesting games and results.
Well, I'll look at the Iowa State Oklahoma State game, because I thought there's an outside chance of that of Oklahoma State creating chaos towards the end of the season.
Yeah,
and possibly, if they remain undefeated, possibly getting in to the playoff discussion. That's over.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's done. And I look at the Cincinnati Navy game.
That was Yeah.
I think the climate now is if Cincinnati handles business, I think I'm thinking that there is a chance that they could get in even over an undefeated Oklahoma team. That was before Caleb.
Undefeated Oklahoma?
No.
That was, well, hold on. That was before Caleb Williams showed up. I thought OU was more vulnerable with Rattler, but with Caleb Williams there, I think I think it's a different team. It's a different OU when he's now that he's quarterback.
They still don't play defense. And let me ask you this: Do you think?
But Navy, they only beat Navy by 7.
I know, but okay, but no, Oklahoma struggled with Kansas.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Oklahoma what's worse?
I think that is the possible blemish for Cincy. So for Cincy to get their pipeline in, they have to blow everybody out from here on out. Navy,
if you're
7-point win,
Rich,
I didn't think that helped their chances.
If you're going to penalize Cincinnati for a close win over Navy, you got to penalize Oklahoma for struggling with Kansas until the very end. Like Kansas.
Well, that might take care of itself, and Oklahoma State might beat Oklahoma.
All I'm saying is Kansas, bro, they are the worst. Like they wouldn't even be a good.
But see, here's the thing. I know the last time I was on, I must have said perception about 100 times, but I go back to perception because again, this is a beauty contest. You're going to cast votes for who do you want to be. When it comes down to picking the 4 teams for the playoffs, it's a beauty contest. A win over a 12-0 OU team coming out of that after beating Baylor, after beating Texas, after beating Oklahoma State, the wins that they'll have for their 12-0 versus Cincy's 12-0 with, yes, they'll have Notre Dame. But after Notre Dame, everyone else, in terms of perception, just perception, like Texas, a win over Texas, unless you're really looking at their record, that's going to mean something. Every year, a win over Texas means something versus a win over Navy.
But I'm assuming that people
like a win over a win over a 7-3 Texas versus a win over a 10-0 Navy. What's going to mean more?
No, hold on.
Perception.
So I'm gonna give you 2 scenarios, and then I'm gonna let Fred chime in because I can tell he wants to say something.
Man, Fred needs to get in here.
Go ahead, Fred.
No, man, I'm not this is like I'm there's not a whole lot I can add on this because I'm a little all over the place. I focused this weekend. I watched, went to the Hokies game, came back home, watched the Dodgers lose, watched my Washington football team lose again today. But the college football this year there's some serious parity, and I'm not up to speed and having a little. It's harder to follow this year, I find.
Yeah. You got
to pay attention to some teams that I thought would have fallen off by now, like Cincinnati. I thought Cincinnati would have fallen, to somebody by now. I thought they'd be out of the picture. But there's not real. Georgia's looked like the best team to me. Other than that, I just don't see any real dominance out there. It's going to come down to SEC teams to me.
Yeah. So let me say, Rich. Let me just say this last thing, Rich. I'm assuming that the committee is going to look at those teams in Texas and know that they're not that good. But think about this too. If you're looking at the Cincinnati win, you also should be able to realize style of play, the way Navy plays, they can hold the ball for a really long time. And that's key. They're running that ball and Cincinnati doesn't have a chance to get it. So they can, that style of play, and traditionally, if we just go back over the last 15 years, compare Navy history to Kansas history, like they've been down the last 2 or 3 years, but they've been a solid football program. They beat Notre Dame. They finished in the top 20 several times. Yeah. The last point I'll make about that is this. So, you're right. You're saying would the committee pick Cincinnati over Oklahoma? But let me ask each person on this group, if they played head to head, do you think Cincinnati could beat Oklahoma? And if I'm saying they're head to head on a neutral site, I'm picking Cincinnati.
I hope you don't bet money on it.
I'll bet a Chick-fil-A sandwich again.
I think Oklahoma would beat them handily.
No, they don't play defense.
I would still have to go with Oklahoma.
But with Cincinnati,
1-6,
with
1-6
Cincinnati
season.
score enough to keep up with OU. With Cincinnati
Yes, look-
scoring, would they score enough to keep up with OU? I don't know about that.
They don't have the talent.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm not sure if they've got a neutral site. I think if they kept it close, I think if they keep it close, there's an outside. There's a chance, but I just don't know if they can go touchdown for touchdown with OU.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right.
Let me do a brief one real quick.
Okay.
Okay. So Georgia was off. They're playing Florida. They should have no problems there. And
Wait a minute.
Oh. Wait.
No problems there.
no,
And these teams
Florida's
each
terrible.
No, they barely.
Not terrible. but
Alabama
Georgia's gonna roll.
struggled.
Yeah,
Alabama
man.
struggled to beat
hung
Beat
in there with
Florida,
Bama.
but they
hung
beat
in there
them.
with Bama. They hung in there with Bama. I wouldn't say they're not going to have any problems.
If Florida picks a quarterback and stays with that one quarterback, I think they'll be fine. I mean, against most of it, they'll probably lose. Let me just say that. But this is a rivalry game. It's at a neutral site.
Yeah.
And it's the SEC, bro. Like, I don't think Georgia's just got a cakewalk. And I'm pulling for Florida because I want that chaos Rich is talking about.
All right. So what I was going to round out with is a couple of things. Right now, I would say for the playoff, I'm going to go with Ohio State, Georgia, Cincinnati with a big asterisk. Oklahoma if they don't lose. And then I got three teams here with one loss, and that is Oregon, Oklahoma State. Now, I don't know. Is there a Big 12 championship, and are they in a different division than Oklahoma? Are they in a different division?
Same division. Oh, no. Big.
There's only one. There's only one.
Yeah. Right.
It's just the top two.
Okay, so Oklahoma State is a one-loss team. And here's your dark horse, Pittsburgh. One loss, good team. I know, I agree with you.
No one-loss ACC team gets a shot.
I understand, but
Not if they beat Wake Forest. All right.
I do think that Oregon, Oklahoma State with one loss, I think the powers that be would take them over Cincinnati. Lastly, has there ever been a 9 overtime game with like Penn State? That was 9 overtimes.
Yeah, but there was one play over. These were two.
Once they get past 3, I think they just go to one play.
Right.
Okay.
It's a 2-point conversion. It's a
2-point conversion. Right. That's a newer rule.
Third round.
Is that a record though?
Oh yeah, I believe not.
Yeah.
The record. Yeah, but once they start getting into it, it became you get a 2-point conversion, you get a 2-point conversion. If they fail, or if they get, that counts as the overtime period. So it's not like you start at the 25 and drove. It's one play, one possession. It's not even one possession. It's one play. You either get the 2 or you don't, and then the other team gets a shot. It was 9 rounds, but it wasn't like remember years ago when LSU and Arkansas played like 5 rounds, 6 rounds of overtime. That game was probably about 5 hours long
because they had all 4. They had they were 20 yards out and they had to drive.
Right, exactly. I you know what? I've never seen a game where they, this is the first time I've ever seen those overtime rules in play. Was this a new rule or this?
I think this is the second or third year. They changed the rules. Just it hasn't gone that far. Teams haven't had to use it. Fred, any thoughts?
No, not on that. The college overtime rules. I'm not a fan of. To take field position out of it. I'd like to bring back the tie. I know there's.
I like that too.
Okay.
Fred, I like that too. I like that a lot.
Player safety.
All right.
Is an issue.
I hate the tie. And then remember, Dye was coach of Auburn. They nicknamed him Pat Tie.
Pat Dye, Syracuse.
Pat Dye for Auburn's legendary coach or whatever. They nicknamed him Pat Tie because he would play for the tie.
Yeah.
If it came down to going for a 2-point conversion for a win and a possible loss versus going for it and possibly winning, he would he would be satisfied with kicking the extra point, 10-10 tie game, walk off the field.
There was that famous, I'm sorry, Russell. There was that famous Michigan State, was it Michigan State, Notre Dame, where they tied. And
yeah.
There was a national championship.
With Bubba Smith and yeah,
right.
I remember that.
So
and they were number one
Russ.
versus number two. That was a number one versus number two game.
Right.
Yeah. I want to go back to your point, Kirk, about Pitt being in it. Let me ask you this though. If Pitt doesn't lose a game, Wake Forest doesn't lose a game, and the rest of the way, and Wake Forest beats Pittsburgh in the ACC championship, does Wake Forest deserve an opportunity? Because I'm saying undefeated. I think the only reason Pitt wouldn't get in is because of one loss, and the one loss was like to Western Michigan or no, whoever it was, directional Michigan. But the point is this: Wake Forest is a Power 5 school. It's not a powerful traditional football program, but we can't go with the argument of Cincinnati being in the Group 5. Wake Forest would have won a Power 5 conference undefeated, and if there aren't very many other undefeateds, does Wake Forest deserve it? And I think I'd rather have Wake Forest instead of 2 or 3 SEC schools, because the other team that's ranked that I don't think will get there that's undefeated, I don't think UT San Antonio, and I don't think SMU or who was the other one? I think and SMU, those teams and San Diego State, they could go undefeated, and I don't think they crack. What about Wake Forest?
Wake Forest does not sell enough cars, beer, pizza, etc. They got 5,000 or 6,000 students. They're from the ACC. The big boys will win out. Those big schools, that's what this system is all about, and more than just sports. That's what I think. I want to tell you, I left Michigan out. Michigan's undefeated. So
they got Michigan State this week on that game that you said was you had predicted a Michigan State win. A couple weeks ago, you predicted a Michigan State win versus Michigan.
And Michigan State is still undefeated.
Yeah.
Right. So
to your point about Wake Forest, I'm looking at their out-of-conference schedule. Campbell, ODU, Norfolk State, and Army. The problem with, and this is, of course, presuming the 12-0 and the ACC championship win. The problem is their non-conference schedule. I just don't see a signature win they're not going to have a signature win in the conference because there's no signature win to have, because even if they beat Clemson, even if they beat Carolina, so that's going to be a tough sell. I think you would have that situation where they're going to be right outside of the top 4, 5, or 6, and that's not going to get them in.
So that's why this is one of the things I hate about college football is because the money or name recognition and not having enough. So now we definitely need to go to, like I said, 12-team playoff. Those teams that would have been like the solid 4, give them a bye in the first round, and let's do that. But that's a whole nother show, guys. I want to thank you for being on the show. Fred, any closing words?
All right. Thanks for having me. It was really a pleasure to talk to you guys. Enjoyed talking football and what's going on with Virginia Tech and around the country. Appreciate it.
You brought it, bro. You brought your Virginia Tech knowledge. We will definitely have you back on. And my dog, you're gonna be up there with VCU. When we talk VCU basketball, you will be up there.
Oh yeah, I got some VCU on underneath.
That's my dog.
Daryl Henderson.
Kendrick Warren.
There you go. I'll close out with this as just one data point. A rabid fan base, especially in this area, Virginia, Maryland, DC, and Pennsylvania, is Penn State. Penn State has 3 top 10 teams left on their schedule. They've got 2 losses. And before COVID, that alumni base was not happy with Franklin. It is one thing to have a #1 recruiting class, which is what they have right now. Now, the recruiting is not finished, but it basically is. You're going to hear a lot about James Franklin if they go 8-4, because that's Penn State. 8-4 is not good enough. I just wanted to close that little nugget in there because I started looking at their schedule. I can't see them beating Ohio State at the Horseshoe. So the thing is that I'm going to stand by Georgia's going to win the whole thing. But if somebody else does, I won't be surprised. And I also will stand by. I don't see Cincinnati getting in. And I like Shane Beamer coming home. That's it.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, look, hey, that's great. I appreciate you guys. Kirk, you're the man. Kirk and Byrd are out.
We are out of here. All right.